Hey, so on other podcasts, we've talked a lot about the importance of building a food culture in your household in order to develop healthy eating habits in children of any age. So today on the podcast, we are going to explore the habit of snacking and give you some healthy snacking tips.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, we've definitely become a society of snackers.
My hands up.
Yeah. Studies have confirmed that the rate of snacking and also the amount of calories that are ingested via snacks has increased dramatically over the years. A 2010 study in the US found that the number of eating occasions has increased over the past 30 years across all age groups, including children. So that's the number of times that we would eat in a day. And the intake of beverages as snacks has also markedly increased, specifically amongst children. I was actually talking to my husband just this week about that, about how I don't remember as a kid actually snacking a whole lot. Like we would just eat
meals.
Yeah, and because my husband actually said, my lunchbox definitely didn't look anything like Jesse's lunchbox. Jesse's got these two big lunch boxes filled with this beautiful assortment of all these different food, and he needs a snack the minute he gets home from school or in between sports. Whereas I don't know
thinking,
that we.
When did this start?
Gosh, we're sounding old.
Oh no, but I mean, where did it come from?
Yeah,
like this fear of not having enough food or going hungry. Or I just think of we're in a world of abundance and of almost the opposite end of the spectrum, with having too much. So it's interesting about where this came from, because I've noticed it in my own head.
Yes.
With my kids, like this concern of, have they had enough to eat? And
maybe it's some kind of generational thing. It's funny, I think about my nan who lived a really exceptionally healthy, long life. And she definitely didn't snack. Like maybe every now and again she'd have on an occasion a morning tea or an afternoon tea, but on the whole she ate 3 kind of quite small meals a day, funnily enough. She was a tiny little eater, very different to me. And look, I don't believe there is an issue with snacking per se, rather than the types and the regularity of snacks that kids consume. And, I hate to push any particular patterns for food consumption. I realise that every single family has their own schedule. Each person within that family has their own requirements. But I thought I would just share some of my ideas on snacking and just some of the common pitfalls that I've personally seen over the years in clinical practice. So first is the amount and the timing of snacks for kids. I have been quite diligent over the years not allowing my kids to snack within a couple of hours of a meal, just ensuring that by the time dinner comes around, they have a good appetite. If my kids are kind of incessantly moaning at me and it's close to dinner and I don't want them to kind of tip over into that hangry stage, because that's also kind of counterproductive for having a relaxing, enjoyable dinner. I might hand out some like raw veggies off the chopping board if I'm still preparing dinner. And, if they balk at that, then they're obviously not that hungry. But other than that, they have to wait. And it may seem harsh, and I understand that temptation for peace and quiet in those circumstances. But if you know that they've had a decent lunch and they've had perhaps an afternoon snack, you're actually not doing either them or yourself any favours to give in to them.
You know what, as you're talking about that, I know with me, my kids' bus used to not get home until pretty late. So we found that we would have dinner early.
And as I said, this is just like, like I initially said, we all need to, we have different schedules,
and we started that because we fell into the trap of the kids coming home ravenous, eating, and then not wanting dinner. So we were like, how are we going to?
I can remember being on holidays with another family, and like late afternoon, their kids would start, whinging for food. And they would hand over a snack. Like I know she had travelled with bags of with a suitcase that was half filled with snack food, basically, which I certainly hadn't done. But she had all this snack food and she'd catered for my kids in the equation, which was lovely of her. But what I actually found was that my kids started not actually having, like, being fussy at dinner. While we were on holidays, and then I realised, it's because they've actually eaten snacks all afternoon.
They're not hungry.
And they're not hungry now. So I had to kind of, politely decline the snacks and tell the kids that they needed to wait to dinner. And I did point out to this mum, and she had extremely picky eaters. Ordinarily, and I wonder if that's one of the reasons why they were picky. I didn't go into it at the time, but looking back on it, I was like, maybe that was why. And when your kids are sitting at a dinner table and you're trying to enjoy a family meal, it's not pleasant for either party, either parents or kids.
So true.
If they're just not hungry, and it sets up animosity over eating, and parents can get stressed over food waste. And I feel like this could be largely avoided in a lot of circumstances, is just managing that timing of the snacking.
Well, when you think of snacking, they're kind of that it's not nutritionally dense normally.
Those foods
and I think
aren't.
Even me, if I'm at home and I just snack instead of having
decent meals.
And I end up eating more of this food that's not really nourishing. And
absolutely.
Feeling not very good at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that really, brings me to my next point, is that every mouthful with children needs to count. Children have tiny little stomachs, so their capacity to be nourished is less than an adult.
This is such a good point.
But they actually require more nourishment than what we do. So way more nourishment. So I know, requirements of something like iron in children and in babies even is, several times more. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly, but several times more than an adult male.
Wow.
So if
that's mind-blowing.
if you have this tiny little stomach, so they're not eating the same volume as an adult male. So I always tried to, when I was giving my kids snacks, I would always try and think, okay, am I able to make every mouthful count here? And this, I think, is especially critical for kids who are natural grazers. Trying to not fall into the trap of doling out packet after packet of convenience foods, which then leads to nutritional deficiency, and then that leads to no desire for a proper meal. It's a really vicious circle. So we need to make sure that even snacks are nourishing. Tiny bodies, because remember, as I said, their tummies are much, much smaller than adults, but their nutrient requirement is much, much greater. So
I'd never thought about this before. You and I kind of worked together. And I just think of when Eva was little and she would love chamomile tea with a bit of milk in it, and how that would fill her tummy up. And then she wouldn't have the space to kind of...
I see that a lot with kids with just milk. I would say that 100% of the children that I've worked with who have really extreme picky eating behaviours are drinking large volumes of milk. And, I can remember one mum who was giving her very young child, could have even been a toddler, I can't actually quite remember, but from memory, I think they were having about 600 mils of milk 3 times a day.
Wow.
And, you look at, I don't know, even if you took a child that was having, say, 500 mils in total of milk 3 times a day, and say they weigh 15 kilo, you multiply that, say an average weight in an adult, and I'm underestimating here, is 60 kilos. That's like them, us drinking 2 litres of milk in a day. And I know that if I drank 2 litres of milk, I would have no appetite whatsoever.
True.
So we need to be really mindful of what we're actually putting and filling these tiny tummies with. Also remember that treats aren't snacks. We're talking about snacks here. Treats are treats. Treats are celebratory, they're occasional, they're not snacks. So a snack is a daily mini meal. It needs to be nourished. I recommend that a little bit of protein be part of all snacks. I find if I give my kids, or even now as older kids, if I give them just a piece of fruit or like a bowl of popcorn or another simple carbohydrate, they're complaining that they're still hungry within a couple of minutes. But if I add in some protein into that snack, if I add in some biltong or put some nut butter on the vegetable sticks or the pieces of fruit, they're less likely to keep hassling me for more food. Another thing to consider is sometimes for some kids, you need to actually close the kitchen. It's exhausting as a parent to be constantly supplying your kids with food. So if you find yourself cleaning up from one meal or snack only to then have a demand for more food, you might actually need to close the kitchen.
Yeah.
This is less likely to happen if the snack in the first instance is really nourishing.
Yeah.
But we live in a society of instant gratification. So, I believe children can learn a lot about delayed gratification by food.
Yeah.
Setting times when the kitchen is open works for some. I know some parents have found it really useful that I've worked with, just having like literally a little schedule on the fridge.
Yeah.
This is when the kitchen's open. So this is when we're eating and this is when the kitchen is closed.
Yeah.
I also know a mum of a large family. She has lots of little ones.
Yeah.
Actually, she just got sick of being asked. So she had the times that they were allowed to help themselves, and she literally had written on the fridge what they were allowed to choose from the fridge. And I've also heard of people just having like literally a container that has like fruit, vegetables, the things you want them to eat, little packets of nuts, like, they make their own little containers or packets of nuts or whatever it is, boiled eggs or whatever, and they're in the fridge for the kids that they can choose what they want, and it gives them that autonomy again.
Choice.
But, with delayed gratification, remember feeling a little bit hungry is not damaging your child. It's not teaching them to wait is, I think, even more important developmentally as a milestone.
I think this is huge. I don't know where, like, again, my curiosity around where this came in, that our kids can't have any form of discomfort is just not helpful.
No.
Because discomfort it's life. Life is uncomfortable. 100%. And going hungry, how good is that next meal after you've eaten? And I know, aren't they doing studies that being hungry releases all these good hormones and kind of chemicals into our bloodstream. So it's actually almost a little healthier to go a little bit hungry than to be constantly full,
constantly satisfied.
Bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think snacks are important, particularly for really busy school kids who aren't great eaters at lunch.
Yeah,
so
my kids.
Yeah, I know. Mine went through stages of when they're busy, they don't prioritise sitting down and eating at lunchtime because the play is more enticing. Like a friend of mine was saying, her son's crazy on soccer. So they've actually been travelling around Australia homeschooling their kids. So she's having her first experience with her kids going to school because her kids are a lot younger than mine. Yeah. And she just can't get her head around her kid who has always been like the most incredible eater coming home, and also a kid that was just always hungry coming home with, only some of his lunch eaten. And I said to her, developmentally, that is completely and totally normal. All kids go through that stage pretty much. Yeah. And you just need to make sure that the bookends of the day are good, and definitely that afternoon snack needs to be a good brekkie, but the afternoon snack needs to be really nourishing. So like it could be, like you said, actually a mini meal even, or even a full meal, and then they have like supper before bed. Yeah.
Something else with school is some kids are super anxious at school.
Yeah.
And so they can't eat, like their tummies are too tight.
Yeah.
And so that's having that really good high protein breakfast in the morning is going to help with their anxiety, and a nourishing snack.
Yeah. Great point. Really good point. Like I did have boundaries with my kids around, like we'd always discuss their lunchbox and have open conversations. Would you like less food? Would you like, food that you can just grab and walk around with, as opposed to sitting and eating? So sometimes like you need to work with your kids through this particular phase. Yeah. But I always did have a rule with my kids that they needed to eat whatever was in their lunchbox if they hadn't during school. So that become their afternoon snack, basically.
If it wasn't mush.
If it wasn't mushy and gross, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that teaches kids not to waste valuable food, and to eat the lunch that's packed for them. Yeah. I think that's important as well.
I agree.
So ways that you can curb snacking all day, like Jane just said, breakfast 100% needs to be really high protein. Brekkie with some fat included as well, I think always helps. Breakfast basically supports healthy learning. It supports a healthy appetite throughout the day, and also will leave you less likely to snack.
Stable blood sugar,
stable mood. As I said, ability to concentrate and learn. So a satisfying breakfast really sets a pattern for healthy food choices throughout the day, and also less need for snacks, I find.
Yeah.
Lunch also should include protein. Your child's protein requirements are going to be quite high especially throughout growth phases. Yeah. Or growth spurts. And if they have some protein in their lunch, you probably will notice that they don't need to snack all afternoon. I also find that children who have a good amount of protein at lunch, again, have more stable moods, more stable blood sugars, more ability to concentrate. And we have already done a podcast on protein from memory. It's number 3. So definitely check that out if you need some support for increasing or just including protein in your kids, or more protein in your kids' diet. So ideas for snacks.
It's tricky, hey, because the kids, all of us have been sold what snacks are, and that it's easy and that it's convenient. And
the food processing industry has done an incredible job of selling snacks. And I honestly, you've reflected on where does this come from. I honestly believe it is driven by the industrialization of our food chain and the processed food industry, because they benefit enormously from us snacking. Like, how much money do people spend on snacks in a day, realistically? But, I would like to encourage you to think outside the box with snacks, and any real whole food can form a snack. So whilst I do occasionally bake or make specific snacks for my kids, usually for their lunchbox as well, I can give them a mishmash of just about anything for snacks. It's not uncommon for my kids to get things like what we call in our household a snack plate most afternoons. It's actually been born from me just being lazy and not having anything prepared, to be honest with you. But it can be literally a plate or a bowl that's full of a whole heap of different things. They never quite know what they're going to get, but it keeps them interested. And it takes the pressure off me having to actually have something planned. So their snack plate sometimes would have maybe a few bits of protein leftovers, like some leftover chicken, or it can be a mix of sweet and savoury, like sometimes literally anything from the fridge or pantry. So it might look like, a piece of fruit or some veggie sticks, a few nuts, some biltong or meat sticks, some olives, a couple of cubes of cheese. They might get like a square of chocolate. So, that's a combination. When you look at that nutritionally, it's a combination of some plant-based goodness and carbohydrates and protein, and then a little deliciousness in the chocolate, like a little bit of a treat thrown in there as well. I often use after school and snacking outside of school hours to include nuts and seeds, because I know for a lot of schools, and I know for my kids' school when they were little, they were nut-free zones. So, but leftover meals are great for snacks. Sometimes I had like an insulated container that I'd sometimes make like a good protein, nutrient-dense smoothie in there. But what I'm going to invite you is to open up is just it doesn't have to be something out of a packet. It can be literally anything and a combination of anything that you want. So, when I'm designing snack recipes, definitely for the website, my primary goal is to make sure that they are as nourishing as possible and that they're protein rich and they have, a variety of really nourishing ingredients. So, if you are inclined to head into the kitchen and make your kids some snacks, and, I just batch bake snacks. Like, I make a heap of different things, throw them in the freezer, and then we always have a container of some sort with an assortment of things that they can also grab. So that's it for me. I'm not going to carry on anymore with snacking. I've given you some ideas. We've jammed on snacking and where it even came from, just to make us mums work a little harder in the kitchen each day. And no, I do believe it's come from the processed food industry and also the privileges that we have as a society.
Yes. We can. It's
to
so
be able to.
now,
We can,
it?
so we do.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you've got some handy tips for healthy snacking.